I've finally got my hands on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. I've been waiting a long time to get my hands on this, but ever since we've got it in, it's been completely booked out. Luckily, I've managed to pinch one for a few days and I've been shooting with it, and I thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. If you're not familiar with the Pocket Cinema cameras from Blackmagic, the 4K or the 6K, their general appeal is that they are small, compact, good value for money cinema cameras. Cinema cameras meaning they are primarily manual focus, and they're really focused on cinematic productions and video making rather than sort of stills and a bit of video as well. Something Blackmagic do really well is making their pocket cameras really easy to just pick up and shoot with straight away. They're not absolutely covered in buttons and wheels. Instead, they make do with minimal buttons and a big old touchscreen on the back through which you can control all the different codecs, resolution settings, focus, audio settings, everything like that. It's a lot more straightforward than you might think, and I actually prefer it to having a bunch of wheels and buttons all over the place, confusing me on a shoot. So what's new with the Pocket 6K? Well, some of you may have spotted that we are no longer using a Micro Four Thirds mount and sensor on the Pocket 6K. Instead, we've swapped over to a Canon EF mount. A lot of people are talking about this at the moment. It's dividing opinions, mainly because for some people that have owned the Pocket 4K, they're looking at moving to this, and they've already got a bunch of Micro Four Thirds glass, and suddenly they're stuck. They have to buy a whole new set of lenses. On the flip side, EF mount is commonly found on some Canon cinema cameras like the C200 I'm shooting this video on, and also on a bunch of stills cameras. So for a lot of people, EF glass is something they already have lying around. Me, for example, I've got this 85 and I can just stick it on and get shooting. The main reason for this change in mount is that we now have a Super 35 size sensor in this camera. That is much larger than the previous Micro Four Thirds chip, and what it means is that we can now get much nicer, shallower depth of field footage. Not that that wasn't possible with the 4K, but with a bigger sensor it is a lot easier. And the other benefit that brings is better low light performance and of course support for 6K. 6K can be recorded at a variety of quality settings, up to Blackmagic RAW at their Q0 constant bitrate or their 3:1 compression ratio settings. And these can also go all the way up to 50 frames per second, which for a camera that is under £2,500 is insanely good value. And that's really one of the main draws for people choosing this camera. I wouldn't blame you for asking at this point, well, why would I ever need to shoot in 6K? And my answer would probably be the same as what I would have said a few years ago about 4K. It's mainly about flexibility. If you're shooting at 6K but exporting at 4K, for example, what this allows you to do is in the edit, if you discover you've got a shot which is not quite framed up exactly how you'd envisaged, you still have the ability to crop in, reframe it and maintain the correct resolution. Now obviously this is something we try to avoid doing in the first place, but it's a nice thing to have just in case. One of the main appeals about shooting at 6K is that when we are delivering at 4K, we can downscale our footage and actually get really beautiful 4K footage, better than what we'd get if we just shot at that resolution to begin with. One last point about shooting in 6K, I suppose, is that we are future-proofing ourselves to some degree. Alright, we might not have 6K TVs at the moment, but you can never tell how quickly these sorts of things come around, and it's nice to know that we are prepared and we're not going to have to go out in a few years and buy a whole other camera. Thinking about negative points for this camera, well, in comparison to the Pocket 4K, we have got that new lens mount, like I said, and that has got a few people up in arms, specifically those that have had a bunch of old Micro Four Thirds glass. But really, the Micro Four Thirds mount was a really versatile mount. You could adapt a bunch of old niche vintage glass to work with the Pocket 4K, and the same can't really be said for the EF mount that we have now, so that's a bit of a shame. The other thing is that we have the same battery system as the Pocket 4K, so using Canon LPE6 batteries. The battery life was never anything to write home about on the Pocket 4K, and with this 6K it's even more power hungry. So you need to make sure you're really prepared and take a bunch of those batteries out with you. And if you're shooting for, say, a whole day, I'd really recommend looking at maybe alternative means of powering it, like a D-tap source, so a V-lock battery or maybe a Hawkwood's gripper. And of course, with 6K comes the problem of storage. This thing absolutely eats through memory cards. For example, the 128 gig CFast card that I had in this, at maximum Blackmagic RAW 3:1. So having just pieced together this video, I've realised I've got something slightly wrong at this point. So if you're shooting 6K Blackmagic RAW at 3:1, with the included 128 gig card, that will actually be full up in 2 minutes. So yeah, you're probably going to need some extra cards. One other thing I noticed whilst shooting with this camera is that if you're going to be using the absolute top end Q0 settings, I couldn't physically find a memory card fast enough to cope with that sort of data rate without dropping frames. It's probably a case of Blackmagic just flexing a little bit, and although we can't find any cards that are actually suitable at the moment, I'm sure they're just around the corner and it won't be long until we do have some. So just something to bear in mind for now. Anyway, back to the video. So that's another thing to bear in mind. Take more memory along than you think you're going to need. All in all then, I'm sort of falling in love with the Pocket 6K. I mean, it's under £2,500 and it shoots 6K at up to 50 frames per second. I mean, that's something that nothing else can really touch at the moment. And I know we do have the Panasonic S1H coming soon. I haven't had my hands on that one yet, so I can't really comment. But in terms of performance per pound, this thing is insanely good. It really is a great camera to use. It's so simple, and okay, it's manual focus, but once you get your head around that, you can just pick it up and go and shoot with it and get some really lovely footage. I'd really recommend you try one out for yourself as always. They're a bit difficult to get hold of in the shops at the moment, so of course you can hire one from us. I've popped a link to its page on our website in the description below. Otherwise you can go to Hireacamera.com, search for Pocket 6K and you can find its page there. On its page you can check availability for your dates, you can pop one in a basket, and you can also check everything that we include with it, so you can make sure you have all the memory and all the batteries that you need before you head out into the field. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it's at least tempted you to go out and try one of these for yourself. They really are huge fun to play around with. If you want to look at more of the in-depth specs of this camera, I know I haven't really covered them in this video, but we have written an in-depth blog post about it, which I've linked down in the description below. Right, that's all from me today, and I'll see you for another video very soon.